Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the new upcoming changes to Noses and Neuts. So this is coming in early December along with a lot of other changes, and I might talk about those in a later video, but there's only so much time, so I'm just going to do one thing per video for now. The Nos and Neut changes are interesting. Now, some people say they're a buff, some people say they're a nerf. At first I was leaning towards nerf, but the more I investigated it, the more I think overall throughout the entire game it's going to be a buff. It's going to make cap warfare a little bit more flexible, and I think you're going to see an increase in the amount of people using cap warfare. So let's get into some of the actual stats here. So what they did is they reduced optimal and added a fall off. So just like guns, if you have projectile turrets, for example, say on a stabber fleet issue, and you've got a 3K optimal and a 17K fall off, what that means is that you're doing 50% of your DPS at 20K optimal plus fall off. At 3K, you're doing 100%. Now this assumes perfect tracking, but just for range only, 50% of damage at optimal plus fall off. If you go beyond fall off, you're still doing damage, but it rapidly drops off to the point to where you're doing just almost nothing. But even though it's almost nothing, you are still doing DPS at a pretty good range, even if it's a very small DPS. They are going to do a tier side on the Tech 1 named modules. So what that means is all those Tech 1 named things, like the unstable, the 5 watt, 50 watt, 500 watt, they're pretty much going to go away and they're not going to be useful anymore. So if you own those now, I would get rid of them. Just dump them, because so far with the changes they're proposing, those aren't going to have much use in the game. It's going to be Tech 2, Faction, or Deadspace. Those are the ones people are going to use. So ships that have a bonus, so like my recent guide, the Ninja Pilgrim guide, ships that have that range bonus are going to see it somewhat nerfed, but not really, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what they're going to do is give you the full optimal range bonus and then a second half range bonus to fall off. We'll see what that means in a second. And finally, they're adding Deadspace energy neutralizers. So let's jump over here to the image of the actual changes and let's discuss what it really means. So for the small energy neutralizers, the Tech 2, you can see here the new names of the Tech 1s and the stats. None of them are as good or nearly as good as Tech 2. Therefore, unstables, 5 watts, just trash now. But, and they'll be renamed to these things here. But the small was 6.3, or is right now 6.3, and will be a 5K optimal. But they're adding a 2.5K fall off. So what that means is that now small energy neutralizers are going to be somewhat effective at 7.5 kilometers. So in the case of faction warfare, that's going to make a huge difference, because if you're a scram kite, let's say you're in a comet, and you're scram kiting in a comet, and you get just one Neut on you while you're scram kiting, it's going to make it difficult to maintain that scram kite. Much less when you get to ships like the Dragoon, which has a bonus to its small Neut range. So right now I think the Dragoon, this is just from memory, and I haven't flown a Dragoon in years, I think a Dragoon Neuts to around 12K right now. 12 kilometers with its bonus. It might be 12.6 if it's a 100% bonus to range. If that's the case, then once you add this fall off, it's going to start being effective to be able to Neut and actually apply Neut pressure at 15K easily, and maybe a little bit of effectiveness out to 20K, but certainly to 15K with these new changes. So with the mediums, it's the same thing. With the mediums, it's 10K now instead of 12.6 for the Tech 2, but you have a 5K fall off. So let's put that in perspective. The Ashimu, has an amount bonus, but not a range bonus. So right now the Ashimu is pretty easily countered. You just kite it. Stay out of its range. Easy to kill. Not many people fly it. So with this, it's going to be harder to kite something like the Ashimu because while it can't hit you in its optimal of 10K, it's going to have optimal plus fall off of 15K. But it's also got an amount bonus, which negates some of the effects of being in fall off. It's also got the fact that it'll probably still be effective out to 20K, and that's just with the Tech 2, which brings us on to the new Deadspace energy neutralizers. I imagine most people, not early, not when this first happens, but once we get a month or two past December, most people are going to start shifting over towards the Deadspace Neuts and Noses. Depends on what the drop rate is and how plentiful they are in the game. But look at just the C-type here. 13.5 optimal. So the C-type is going to have a greater optimal than the old Tech 2. It's fantastic. That's going to be so heavily used. On top of that, it's got a great fall off, 6,750. So that means that you're going to have a 20K optimal plus fall off, just over 20K. Put that on something like the Pilgrim or the Curse, which is even better. You put it on the Curse, and all of a sudden, you're talking easily being effective with your newts at 50K. Easily being effective at 50K. And possibly being able to be somewhat effective out to 60 or more. And that's with medium newts on a Curse. So you're going to see the Curse a lot more in faction PvP, somewhat more in solo, but mostly not faction, fleet PvP. So in fleets, all the different fleet types are going to want curses in their fleets now, especially the kitey fleets that like to stick out around 50K, 40, 50K. So curses and Orthruses, hate Orthruses, but you know, you got to acknowledge they exist. Curse plus Orthrus, good combination. You know, you can match it up with a Hugin, get even more range control. Match it up with a attack battlecruiser like a Talos or a Tornado, and basically use it to keep everything off the main DPS ship, the battlecruiser. There's all kinds of things you could do with it. It's going to make the Curse more popular as a ship. So Curse is going to definitely get some use. It might go up in value, which brings me to my thing to talk about ISK a little bit. Now, even if you don't PvP and you could care less about energy neutralizers, they're absolutely unimportant. All you do is mine and mission and run sites. If that's the case, then you should still be very interested in this, because these newts of all sizes, the small, the medium, and probably especially the large, are going to be in extremely high demand. So when this expansion hits, the Corpum energy neutralizers, just going to go through the roof. And Corpi, and what's this one? Corpus. I believe, pretty sure, that these drop in blood space, Corpi and Corpum. Pretty sure. So you're going to want to be in blood space. Like, just top of my head, I'm pretty sure that's Providence, Genesis, maybe Corazor. Quite a few of them. So in the blood space, the blood rats, you're going to be able to find these in the combat sites. You'll even find, I think, the smalls in combat sites in high sec and low sec, and then mediums and larges in the combat sites in null sec is what I imagine it'll be. And if you want to make tons of this, get out there the day of the release. Be ready. Be parked in one of these areas so that you log on and get started that day right after the patch. And farm these things to death. Farm the crap out of them. Because I guarantee you that after the release, these things will be going for 2 or 3 times the price that they will eventually go for in a month or two. So how much is that going to be? It depends on the drop rate. I would have to guess that it couldn't be any lower than 100 million ISK each for C-types when it first releases, and that possibly could go much higher. If there's a high drop rate, a little bit lower. It all depends. But no matter what, these things are going to be worth a lot, and there's probably going to be some areas where, like, if you got an X type heavy, that's something that you're looking at selling for billions of ISK, especially early on, because right now, if you look up on the market and you look up Chelms or Dracliras, you look up some of these officer newts that have been in the game for a while, they're heavily used on super carriers. So if you look up the prices of these two, that are basically going to be the equivalent of these new Deadspace ones, you're going to see, I'm pretty sure, that they're in the billions. I don't know that for sure. And, I'll have to check and I'll add that to the article when I'm done. But potentially this is a billion ISK opportunity for people who go out and farm. You could make several billion ISK in a single day if you get lucky and get some good drops here and just farm this stuff for like 8 hours. I know that's crazy, but do it for 8 hours one day and you might not have to rat or do missions or anything else for the next 6 months. So I'm not sure that's what's going to happen. That's just my theory. So finally, before we end this video, I want to talk about the Pilgrim specifically. So what's going to happen to the Pilgrim in its current form and current fitting? I will consider changing the fitting or having an alternative fitting for Deadspace Neuts later on once the prices stabilize. But for now, the new ranges. Right now, the Pilgrim gets a 100% at level 5s, 100% bonus to Neut range, which puts it at 25.2 kilometers of Neut range, full power, with a mount bonus as well. Now it's going to be an optimal of 20 with a fall off of 7.5 kilometers, I believe. So that's going to be a 27.5 optimal plus fall off. Now, yes, you're not going to be as effective at 25k as you were before this patch, but in the majority of fights where it really counts, where you really need full Neut power, you're orbiting at less than 20k anyway in the Pilgrim, right? Once the fight stabilizes, you're at less than 20k, so you're getting full power. However, there are situations where it's helpful to be able to Neut further, or to be able to get Neuts on sooner. In that case, this is a huge buff. I'm positive it will make the Pilgrim a better ship. So when you start talking optimal plus 2 times fall off, that's 35k. Optimal plus 2 times fall off, 3 Neuts with, I forget what the effectiveness bonus is, but it's probably about the same. So that's about, I'm not sure. It's somewhere in like, it's about the equivalent to half of 1 Neut in full, a quarter to a half of a Neut that's in optimal range. So it's full power. So still against a frigate or a destroyer, or more specifically against the frigates that are really your enemy in a Pilgrim, the carries and the Garmer, against those frigates, it's going to be enough to remove their point from you and help you to escape. So, in that situation where maybe you just got done killing a ship in your Pilgrim, and then a carries comes in and he orbits you at 32 kilometers and he's got you pointed, well, there's not much you can do with the Pilgrim pre-Neut changes, except for put your Warrior 2s on him and hope there's enough DPS to force him off the field or kill him before his buddies arrive. With this change, you have the added ability that you'll be able to Neut his point off you as well. So you should still put your drones and damage on him in case he has a cap booster or he's able to keep it going somehow. But you've got a second choice that's going to make it a little bit more powerful. And that's going to be a big buff for the Pilgrim, but also for every other ship that uses Neuts in the game right now. The Curse, the Armageddon. Just think how awesome an Armageddon is going to be. It's still kind of useless, but the Neuting power is going to be much better because you're going to have a much greater range with the Armageddon. You're going to be able to Neut pretty heavily to long ranges, especially with the Deadspace. You're going to be able to go just insane ranges with that and still do really heavy newt, a lot of newting power, especially with something like the Balgorn. So I think the biggest effect of it's going to be small newts. When it comes to faction warfare and small frigate PvP, I think that's where it's going to have the biggest impact, and it's going to make the biggest difference in the way people fly. So that's the Newts and Nos changes that are coming for December, the Newt and Nos changes. And, I think they're pretty cool. I think that overall they'll add some more depth to the game. They'll make fitting Newts a little bit more favorable, so people are going to start using them more. And best of all, to anyone who wants to make some ISK, it's going to be real easy ISK, I think. That first couple weeks when people are just out there farming the heck out of them, you're going to make a lot of ISK by getting these things and throwing them up on the market as fast as possible.